from here, you could see the Hollywood sign and you would have no idea.
What if the love story Meghan Markle sold to the world was never really about love at all? What if the first man who gave her everything, his trust, his career connections, his loyalty, was nothing more than a stepping stone she kicked away the moment she saw a brighter stage? That's the claim now rising from the shadows. After 12 long years of silence, Trevor Engelson, Meghan's ex-husband, has broken his silence. And the story he's telling threatens to shatter everything we thought we knew about Meghan's carefully polished climb from Hollywood obscurity to royal fame. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Think about that for a moment. 12 years of quiet. 12 years of watching from a distance as the woman who once called him her forever partner ascended to a throne of cameras, headlines, and royal titles. Most ex-spouses might fade into irrelevance, but not Trevor. He held on to his silence, not because he had nothing to say, but because sometimes silence is more powerful than words. Until now. Why now? That's the first burning question. Why wait over a decade, and then suddenly let the world hear his voice? Was it revenge? Was it closure? Or was it simply the weight of truth pressing too heavily on his chest to ignore any longer? Ask yourself, if your ex-spouse became one of the most famous women on earth, would you stay quiet forever? Or would you, at some point, step forward and say, here's the truth that nobody wants to hear? Trevor's truth is devastating in its simplicity. Meghan didn't marry him for love. She married him because he was useful, a producer with connections, a man who could open doors she couldn't unlock on her own. He was her bridge to Hollywood, her shortcut through the maze of auditions, casting calls, and cutthroat competition. But once she'd crossed that bridge, once she found herself standing on firmer ground, she burned it behind her. That's the narrative he now paints, and it's one that strikes a nerve because it aligns with whispers we've all heard but never confirmed. Let's rewind. The Meghan Markle we know today, the Duchess, the podcast host, the global celebrity, wasn't always so powerful. She was once a struggling actress, hustling for minor roles, clawing her way into an industry where rejection is the norm and survival demands more than talent. Meghan was ambitious, no question. But ambition without opportunity is like a spark without oxygen. Trevor Engelson was that oxygen. He wasn't just a husband. He was an industry insider, a Hollywood producer with access to the rooms Meghan couldn't yet enter. That's where their story begins, and it's the part nobody likes to talk about. Because when we think about fairy tales, we think about true love, serendipity, destiny. But Hollywood isn't a fairy tale factory. It's a marketplace. And in that marketplace, relationships can be transactions, sometimes wrapped in romance, but still transactional at their core. So here's the question you should be asking yourself right now. Was Meghan's first marriage about love, or was it about leverage? For Trevor, the answer was obvious at the time. He was in love. He believed in her. He supported her, both emotionally and professionally. He was the man behind the curtain, pushing her forward, championing her auditions, making introductions, smoothing her path. To him, it was a partnership. To Meghan, according to Trevor's silence-breaking words, it was a stepping stone. Imagine that betrayal. The person you marry, the one you think you're building a future with, secretly treating you as a ladder rung. How would you feel if you discovered that you weren't the destination, but simply a pit stop? That once your usefulness expired, so did your relationship? That's not just heartbreak, that's humiliation. And Trevor endured it silently, watching Meghan rise higher and higher, her image polished to perfection, while his story remained buried. But here's where it gets darker. Meghan didn't just leave Trevor. She left him in a way that screamed detachment, even cruelty. According to those close to the split, Meghan ended the marriage not with a dramatic confrontation, not with a painful sit-down, but with a FedEx package. She mailed back her wedding ring. Cold, clinical, transactional, like she was crossing a line item off a checklist. If that doesn't sound like someone closing a business deal rather than a marriage, what does? And yet, for 12 years, Trevor kept that story to himself. He could have cashed in. He could have written a tell-all, sold interviews, fed the tabloids. Offers came, millions dangled in front of him. But he didn't take them. Why? That's the mystery that makes his voice now so powerful. Because it suggests that what he's saying today isn't about money or fame. It's about finally releasing a truth he can no longer suppress. The timing is what makes this explosive. Meghan's image is fragile. She spent years cultivating her brand as a survivor, a humanitarian, a woman wronged by an ancient institution. But Trevor's words cut through that narrative like a blade. They suggest that Meghan's royal story wasn't her first strategic play, that the same calculating ambition she showed in the palace was already at work in Hollywood, that she's been rehearsing this role for years, and Trevor was merely the first casualty. Now let's pause. Why should this matter to us? Why should the world care about a Hollywood marriage that ended over a decade ago? Because stories like this don't just shape our understanding of Meghan. They shape our understanding of ambition, love, and betrayal in the public eye. Meghan positioned herself as a symbol of resilience, of romance, of modernity clashing with tradition. But if that symbol was built on betrayal, if the foundation was always opportunistic, then what does that say about everything that came after? Think of it like this. If the first chapter of her adult life was about using love as leverage, then maybe every chapter since has been about the same pattern, finding the next stepping stone, the next opportunity, the next rung on the ladder. From Trevor to Hollywood, from Hollywood to royalty, and now from royalty to global celebrity activism. Does the pattern hold? Or is Trevor's story simply the bitter words of a man who feels discarded? That's the tension we'll explore. But right now, it's Trevor's silence-breaking confession that demands our attention. And here's something even more unsettling. Trevor isn't painting himself as the villain or the victim. He's painting Meghan as the strategist. He doesn't claim she lacked talent. He doesn't deny she worked hard. But he suggests that for Meghan, relationships were never about mutual growth. They were about advancement. That's a claim that doesn't just tarnish Meghan's reputation. It reframes her entire life story. So, what happens when a carefully constructed image collides with a raw, unvarnished truth? What happens when the silence breaks, and the person who knew you before the fame, before the crown, before the cameras, speaks up? The impact isn't just personal. It's cultural, because it forces us to ask, how much of what we believe about Meghan Markle has been a performance all along? Now, don't get me wrong. Ambition isn't inherently bad. Everyone wants to rise. Everyone wants success. But the question is, at what cost? And at whose expense? Was Trevor Engelson simply collateral damage in Meghan's rise? Or was he a willing participant who only later realized the true script of their relationship? That's the ambiguity that makes this story not just scandalous, but deeply human. Because it forces us to wrestle with the blurry line between love and ambition, between partnership and opportunism. Picture Trevor watching Meghan on TV years later, walking down the aisle at St. George's Chapel, marrying Prince Harry. The world saw a fairy tale. What did Trevor see? Did he see the woman he once loved, transformed into a global icon? Or did he see the same calculating strategist who had once used him, now playing a bigger game on a grander stage? Imagine the sting of recognition, the bitter déjà vu. That's the lens Trevor's revelation gives us, a behind-the-curtain glimpse at the actress before the Duchess, and the man who became her first discarded character. And here's where the tension tightens. Trevor's story isn't just about Meghan's past. It's about her present and her future. Because if her first marriage was a stepping stone, what does that mean for her second? What does that mean for Harry? For the monarchy? For the brand she's built on love, family, and authenticity? Is Harry the grandest stepping stone of all? Or is he the final destination? That's the question hanging in the air, and it's one that makes Trevor's voice today so haunting. But remember, this is just the beginning. Trevor's silence has been broken, but the echoes of his words are only starting to ripple outward. The deeper we go into this story, the clearer it becomes that Meghan's rise wasn't accidental. It was designed. And Trevor Engelson, whether he likes it or not, was part of the blueprint. The man she loved, or the man she used? The answer lies in the chapters to come. Because before Meghan Markle was the Duchess, before she was the face on magazine covers, before she was the woman sparking debates across the globe, she was just another actress in Hollywood. Hungry, determined, desperate to make it. And into that story walked a man named Trevor Engelson. A man who thought he was stepping into a romance, but who, according to him now, was unknowingly stepping into a carefully rehearsed performance. So let me ask you, do you believe in fate, or do you believe in strategy? Was it fate that brought Meghan and Trevor together in the bustling Hollywood scene of the early 2000s? Or was it strategy, a calculated move by a woman who already knew where she wanted to go? Picture it. Hollywood, 2004. Meghan is young, ambitious, and struggling. She's auditioning for minor parts, often getting cast in blink-and-you-miss-it roles. The girl on the edge of the frame. The nurse, the secretary, the party guest who says one line before the camera pans away. She's not yet the lead. She's not yet Rachel Zane on Suits. She's just another name on a casting sheet. But behind her eyes burns ambition, a fire too big to be ignored. And then there's Trevor. He's not a household name either, but in Hollywood, he's got something even more valuable: access. Trevor is a producer. He's part of the machine that decides who gets seen and who stays invisible. He's not Spielberg, he's not Scorsese, but he's got influence. And influence in Hollywood can be more seductive than fame itself. Now ask yourself, what happens when an ambitious actress meets a producer with the keys to doors she can't open alone? Is it love? Or is it opportunity wrapped in romance? At first glance, it looked like love. Friends say they were inseparable. Meghan dazzled with her charm, her wit, her ability to make anyone in the room feel like the most important person alive. Trevor, on the other hand, was grounded, stable, the kind of man who could give her both affection and industry credibility. Together, they looked like a Hollywood power couple in the making, though on a smaller scale than the megastars. But here's the contradiction. For Trevor, this was real. He was falling. He was investing. He was supporting Meghan in every way he could. For Meghan, according to Trevor's silence-breaking truth, it was something else entirely. She saw the relationship not just as companionship, but as a platform. She played the role of devoted girlfriend, then fiancée, then wife. But was she already rehearsing her exit from the very first act? Let me paint you a picture. Imagine Meghan at a small Hollywood event. The room is filled with up-and-comers, producers, casting directors, assistants. Everyone is hustling, everyone is hungry. Meghan enters, holding Trevor's hand. He sees it as a night out with his partner. She sees it as a stage. Every conversation, every introduction, every handshake, an opportunity. And Trevor? He doesn't notice. He thinks she's just being charming. But to those watching closely, there's a sense she's always on, like an actress who never steps out of character. And isn't that the irony? Meghan, the actress struggling to land big roles, may have been giving the performance of her life off-screen. A performance that convinced Trevor he was her forever. But let's dig deeper. Meghan wasn't without talent. She was hardworking, disciplined, and yes, she could act. But Hollywood is littered with talented women who never make it. It takes something extra, something cold, something strategic. Meghan knew this. She wasn't just competing with other actresses. She was competing with time, with luck, with an industry that discards women the second they pass their sell-by date. She needed a shortcut, and Trevor was that shortcut. This is where the emotional spike hits. Trevor wasn't just Meghan's boyfriend. He was her believer. He gave her scripts to read, contacts to meet, opportunities to seize. He became the engine behind her ambition, pushing her forward without realizing he was also pushing himself out of the picture. And here's the twist. Meghan didn't resist. She leaned into it. She played the role of the grateful partner while plotting her next scene. Now let's ask a brutal question. Did Meghan ever love Trevor? Or did she only love what Trevor represented? Because Trevor wasn't just a man. He was a stepping stone into Hollywood. He was stability in an unstable world. He was access dressed up as romance. And once his usefulness expired, so did the marriage. Think about your own life. Have you ever felt used? Maybe not for fame, maybe not for Hollywood connections, but for something. Money, status, convenience. How did it feel? Betrayal isn't just about love lost. It's about realizing that your heart was someone else's strategy. That's the sting Trevor carried, silently, for over a decade. But back in those early days, Trevor couldn't see it. All he saw was a rising actress with a smile that could light up a room and a determination that could bulldoze obstacles. He was smitten. Friends say Trevor treated Meghan like gold. He flew across the country for her. He rearranged his schedule for her. He made sacrifices because he believed she was worth it. And Meghan? She accepted it all. Smiled, thanked him, leaned on him. But deep down, was she already rehearsing the moment she would walk away? There's a chilling detail whispered by those who knew them. At gatherings, Meghan often spoke less about her relationship and more about her career. She lit up when talking about auditions, roles, opportunities. Trevor was a part of her story, but never the center. For her, the spotlight was the real love. And Trevor? He was simply holding the lamp. And here's the contradiction again. Trevor thought he was building a life with Meghan. Meghan may have thought she was building a brand. He saw a marriage. She may have seen a contract. He dreamed of a home. She dreamed of a stage. The irony is staggering. Meghan Markle, the woman who would later captivate the world with her royal romance, may have started her journey by scripting her first husband out of the story. But Trevor couldn't see it yet. He was still the man in love. The man giving, supporting, believing. And Meghan? Meghan was still smiling, still charming, still performing. The early days of Meghan and Trevor's relationship looked like a fairy tale on the surface. Young love in Hollywood. Glamour, ambition, shared dreams. But beneath that surface, according to Trevor's truth, was something much colder: calculation. The seeds of betrayal were already there. And yet, even knowing that now, the most shocking part isn't how Meghan began the relationship. It's how she ended it. Because if the beginning was scripted, the ending was pure theater, cruel, cold, unforgettable. And that ending would not only devastate Trevor, but also foreshadow the ruthless ambition Meghan would later unleash on a much grander stage. Because the Hollywood beginning was just Act 1. What came next would reveal that Trevor was never truly her partner. He was just her stepping stone. Was Meghan Markle ever really in love with Trevor Engelson? Or was she simply in love with what he represented? That's the question that lingers like a shadow over their story. And when you look back, when you peel away the charm, the smiles, the wedding photos, and the Hollywood glitz, a troubling picture starts to emerge. Was this marriage about heart, or was it about hustle? Let's start here. Every relationship has motives. Some are pure, some are messy, some are a mix of both. But with Meghan and Trevor, the motives may have been starkly unequal. Trevor, by all accounts, loved Meghan. He believed in her talent, in her potential, in her future. He saw himself as her rock. But Meghan? According to the story that's now being whispered louder than ever, Meghan saw Trevor as a rung on the ladder, one she would climb and discard the moment she reached the next step. Think about that for a moment. Imagine pouring your love, your energy, your time into someone who may have never intended to stay. Have you ever been in that position, where someone seemed to adore you, but deep down you felt like you were just filling a role in their bigger plan? That's the tragedy of Trevor Engelson. He thought he was the hero of their love story. Meghan may have always seen him as a placeholder. Let's rewind to the period just before Meghan landed Suits, because that's where this chapter really takes shape. Meghan was struggling. She was still booking bit parts, still hustling, still running into brick walls. And Trevor was there, steady, supportive. He was the producer with connections, the man who could open doors. He helped her network. He put her in the right rooms. He made calls. And Meghan leaned on him, hard. But here's the twist. Those who knew them say Meghan didn't just lean. She pulled. She drained. She positioned herself as the ambitious partner, while Trevor was the safety net. Every time she stumbled, he caught her. Every time she needed an introduction, he gave it. Every time she needed reassurance, he delivered. But behind the gratitude was calculation. Meghan wasn't just chasing auditions. She was chasing exits. Now pause and ask yourself this. How do you tell the difference between love and strategy? Between someone who's truly committed to you and someone who's only committed to the opportunities you provide? That's the paradox Trevor faced. He thought her ambition was shared. He thought they were building together. But maybe Meghan was only building herself. Consider this contradiction. Meghan could be warm, affectionate, attentive. She could play the role of the loving girlfriend, the supportive fiancée, the doting wife. But beneath the warmth was an icy determination. If love is about compromise, Meghan wasn't compromising. If marriage is about partnership, Meghan wasn't partnering. She was advancing. And Trevor, whether he knew it or not, was part of her advance team. And here's the cruel irony. Meghan never hid her ambition. She spoke openly about her goals, her hunger, her desire for more. That was part of her allure. She wasn't passive. She wasn't timid. She wanted everything, and she said so. Trevor admired that. He loved her drive. But what he didn't see was that the same drive that attracted him would eventually be the very thing that destroyed them. Friends of Trevor say he was blindsided by how quickly things shifted once Meghan began tasting success. The girl who once clung to him during auditions, who leaned on his stability, began to distance herself. Suddenly, career came first. Suddenly, Trevor wasn't at the center of her universe. He was orbiting her ambitions. And then came the subtle signs. Invitations Meghan accepted without Trevor. Events she attended alone. Conversations that revolved around her opportunities, not their relationship. Trevor was still there, but his place was shrinking. Slowly, painfully, deliberately. Have you ever felt that? The slow fade? When someone you love doesn't leave all at once, but inch by inch, pulling away until one day you realize they're already gone. That's what Trevor endured. Meghan didn't rip the bandage off. She peeled it back, bit by bit, until the wound was exposed. Now here's where the contradictions bite hardest. Meghan could be cold and calculating, yes. But she could also be dazzlingly affectionate. Just when Trevor might have felt her slipping away, she'd flash that smile, give that warmth, reel him back in. Push and pull, hot and cold. Enough to keep him hoping, enough to keep him blind. Was that love? Or was it manipulation? The marriage itself is the ultimate contradiction. On paper, it looked like devotion. They married in 2011 in a laid-back Jamaican ceremony, surrounded by friends, laughter, and a vibe of easygoing joy. But even at that wedding, there were whispers. Guests noted Meghan's focus on the spectacle, on the fun, on the attention, less on the solemnity of the vows. Some even said it felt more like a Hollywood after-party than a sacred union. Was that the first red flag? That even on her wedding day, Meghan was more interested in the stage than the partner? But for Trevor, there was no doubt. He was in it for real. He was committed. He was the man who thought he'd found forever. And that's what makes his story so gutting. Because while Trevor was thinking in terms of decades, Meghan may have been thinking in terms of stepping stones. And here's the emotional punch. When Trevor looks back now, with 12 years of silence finally broken, he doesn't just see a marriage. He sees a strategy. He sees himself not as a husband, but as a rung on Meghan's ladder. And he can't help but wonder, did she ever love him at all? Or was the love itself just another performance? Imagine carrying that weight for years. Watching your ex-wife marry into royalty. Watching her become a global figure. Watching the world worship her, while you hold the memory of how coldly she walked away. How would that feel? Would you stay silent forever? Or would you, eventually, let the world know the truth? And Trevor's truth is devastating. Meghan didn't choose him for love. She chose him for strategy. He was a stepping stone. Nothing more, nothing less. But if Trevor was just a stepping stone, then what came next proves that Meghan had always planned for a much bigger stage. Because once Meghan began moving in Hollywood circles, once she started testing her charm in rooms bigger than Trevor's, the true cracks began to show. And the first real fracture came not at home, but under the glitz of Hollywood lights, where ambition whispered louder than vows, and where Meghan Markle's next act was already being written. Ambition whispers. Sometimes it whispers so quietly that you mistake it for background noise. Other times, it shouts so loudly it drowns out everything else, even love. For Meghan Markle, those whispers became a roar the moment she began moving through Hollywood circles. And that's where the story of her marriage to Trevor Engelson takes a sharp, unsettling turn. Because here's the question. When Meghan stepped into those rooms filled with producers, agents, and actors, was she still Trevor's wife first? Or was she already rehearsing for her next role as Meghan Markle, solo star? Picture it. Hollywood nightlife. Private parties in Beverly Hills, mixers at trendy West Hollywood lounges, film premieres buzzing with energy. For Trevor, these were work functions. For Meghan, they were stepping stones disguised as cocktails. Every handshake was a potential script. Every laugh was an opportunity. Every lingering glance was another door creaking open. And Trevor? He was proud. He loved introducing Meghan to people. She had the kind of charm that made rooms bend around her. She wasn't just another actress. She was magnetic. She knew how to lean in, to make someone feel like they were the only person in the world. It's a gift, but it's also a weapon. Have you ever known someone who could shift like that? Warm, funny, engaging, but only when the right eyes were on them? That's what friends began to notice. Meghan was on when she needed to be, and then distant when the crowd thinned. To Trevor, she was dazzling. To others, she was calculating. And here's the contradiction. Meghan wasn't faking her charm. She really could light up a room. But she was also using it. She wasn't just socializing. She was strategizing. And Trevor, standing by her side, thought he was her partner in this world. What he didn't realize was that he was her plus one in a story that was already shifting away from him. Let's talk about those silent moves. Because Meghan wasn't loud about it. She didn't announce her intentions. She didn't need to. Instead, she maneuvered quietly, subtly. A conversation here. A contact there. Numbers exchanged. Meetings set. She played the Hollywood game with precision. While Trevor thought they were just mingling, Meghan was laying out a roadmap. A roadmap that didn't necessarily include him. And the irony? Trevor was the one who brought her into those rooms. He was the insider. The one with the connections. The one who opened the door. But once the door was open, Meghan didn't need him to hold it anymore. She could walk through on her own. That's the cruel truth of ambition. The very person who helps you rise can become the first person you discard. Now here's where the emotional weight builds. Imagine Trevor watching Meghan shine in those circles. Proud at first, maybe even a little awed. But then, slowly, realizing he was fading into the background. That when people looked at them, they weren't seeing Trevor Engelson, producer. They were seeing Meghan Markle, rising star. His identity began to blur. He was no longer the man with access. He was the man standing beside her. And in Hollywood, that's a dangerous place to be. Have you ever felt invisible? Like the spotlight moved just an inch, and suddenly you were in the dark? That's what Trevor endured. And Meghan? She wasn't pulling him back into the light. She was moving forward, faster, brighter, leaving him in her shadow. The contradictions deepened. Meghan still played the role of wife at home. She still smiled for Trevor, still thanked him for his support. But in those Hollywood circles, she wasn't his wife. She was her own brand. She was independent. She was testing what it felt like to stand without him. And the more she tested, the less she seemed to need him. And then came the rumors. Whispers among friends. Meghan was seen networking aggressively, chasing roles, chasing connections. Some said she seemed less interested in being Trevor's partner, and more interested in being Meghan Markle, solo operator. Others defended her. After all, isn't that what ambitious women do? But the whispers grew. The balance between marriage and ambition was tipping, and Trevor was losing. Now here's the irony. Meghan's hustle was working. Roles began to trickle in. Her name was whispered more often. She was on the cusp of something bigger. And yet, the bigger she became, the smaller Trevor felt. Their love story was being rewritten in real time. And it all came to a head during one trip. A trip that should have been a bonding moment, but instead became a breaking point. The details are murky, but those close to the couple say Meghan's behavior during a Hollywood-related getaway exposed just how differently they saw the world. For Trevor, it was about partnership. For Meghan, it was about progress. And that's when the cracks turned into fractures. Ask yourself, what happens when two people in a marriage are playing different games? One is playing for love, stability, forever. The other is playing for advancement, opportunity, escape. Can that marriage survive? Or is it doomed the moment the strategies collide? For Trevor and Meghan, the answer became painfully clear. Hollywood wasn't just a backdrop to their love story. It was the wedge driving them apart. Because every circle Meghan entered, every move she made, was less about us and more about me. And that's the devastating truth Trevor would only understand later. Meghan wasn't building a marriage. She was building a launch pad. He thought he was part of the rocket. He was really just the fuel. But the Hollywood circles were just the beginning. The real unraveling didn't come at the parties or the premieres. It came at the altar itself, on the day they promised forever. Because even at their wedding in Jamaica, the signs were there, clear as day. Signs that Meghan wasn't planning forever. She was planning her next move. And what happened at that wedding would leave Trevor reeling and everyone who saw it whispering. Most weddings are about promises, about forever, about two people standing before their families and saying, "This is it. You're my person." But Meghan Markle's first wedding to Trevor Engelson? According to whispers from those who were there, it didn't feel like forever. It felt like a party, a show. A scene from a Hollywood script where the vows were just dialogue and the marriage was just a prop. So here's the question. What happens when a wedding, the one day meant to symbolize love above all else, looks more like a performance than a commitment? Let's go back to 2011. Meghan and Trevor decided to tie the knot in Jamaica at a beachside resort in Ocho Rios. It wasn't the royal spectacle the world would later watch when Meghan married Prince Harry. It wasn't broadcast across millions of screens, dissected in tabloids, or obsessed over by royal watchers. It was laid back. Sun, sand, rum, and reggae. The kind of wedding that screams casual love story. But beneath the relaxed vibe, the details told another story. Guests remember the atmosphere being less sacred and more wild. Not an intimate ceremony where every vow was a tear-stained promise. More like a spring break reunion. Drinking games. Shots. A party that went on for days. And Meghan? She thrived in it. She wasn't the nervous bride overwhelmed with emotion. She was the hostess. The star of the show. Smiling. Laughing. In control. Now, there's nothing wrong with a fun wedding. Plenty of couples want a celebration. But here's the contradiction. Trevor seemed deeply in love, invested in the moment, while Meghan seemed detached. Almost as if the vows were less important than the spectacle. Have you ever seen someone go through the motions of something important, but their heart isn't really in it? That's what some guests claim about Meghan. She was radiant, yes, but she was also rehearsed. Smooth. Too smooth. As if she was reading from a script she'd already memorized. And here's the detail that whispers louder than any rumor. Meghan reportedly showed up late to her own wedding. Think about that. On the day you're supposed to declare you're forever, you keep the man who adores you waiting. Was it nerves? Or was it indifference? Was it the behavior of a bride, or the behavior of an actress playing a bride? Friends noticed other things too. Meghan's focus wasn't on Trevor, but on the guests, the cameras, the energy of the event. She basked in the attention. Trevor, on the other hand, seemed focused entirely on her. There's the imbalance again, one giving everything, one taking everything in. And then there's the way Meghan spoke about the wedding afterward. Not as a sacred memory, not as the happiest day of her life, but as a fun event, a good party, as if the marriage was secondary to the celebration. That subtle difference, when you look back, speaks volumes. Ask yourself this. If your wedding feels more like a production than a promise, what does that say about the foundation of the marriage? The Jamaican ceremony has since become almost a ghost in Meghan's story. It's rarely mentioned, overshadowed completely by her later royal wedding. But maybe that's not an accident. Maybe Meghan wanted it erased because it didn't fit the narrative she would later sell. A narrative of romance, destiny, fairy tale love. Because the truth of her first wedding, the truth of how casual, detached, even transactional it seemed, doesn't support that image. There's an even darker irony here. Meghan's Jamaican wedding took place just before she landed her breakthrough role in Suits. She said, "I do," to Trevor at almost the same moment she was stepping into the biggest opportunity of her career. The timing is uncanny, almost poetic, almost strategic. It's as if the marriage itself was part of her transition from one life to the next. And when Suits took off, when Meghan's name started echoing louder in Hollywood, that marriage suddenly became expendable. Think about that contradiction. Most people marry because they want someone to share their success with. Meghan's marriage dissolved the moment success arrived. For Trevor, success should have made them stronger. For Meghan, it made him unnecessary. And here's where the story twists again. Because when you look closely, Meghan's wedding in Jamaica wasn't just casual. It was careless. As if she already knew this wasn't the ending, but just another act in the play. One guest allegedly said it best. She was radiant. But it wasn't the radiance of a woman in love. It was the radiance of a woman in control. That line cuts deep. Because if Meghan wasn't radiating love, what was she radiating? Ambition, determination, control over her own narrative. Now, let's not ignore Trevor's perspective. For him, it was real. He stood there on that beach, ring in hand, vows in heart, believing this was forever. He wasn't acting. He wasn't rehearsing. He was living the role of husband, completely unaware that his partner may have already been rewriting the script in her mind. Have you ever been in that position? Believing you're in a love story, only to later realize you were the supporting character in someone else's drama? That's the gut punch of Trevor's story. And the way Meghan ended that marriage only reinforces the idea that the wedding was never sacred to her. Years later, when she walked away, she didn't even have the courtesy of a face-to-face goodbye. She mailed him her wedding ring. A FedEx delivery. Cold. Efficient. Transactional. as if she was returning a borrowed prop after the show had wrapped. The Jamaican wedding, then, wasn't the beginning of a lifelong marriage. It was the prologue to a much larger performance. Meghan wasn't saying, "I do forever." She was saying, "I do for now." But here's the twist that makes this even more unsettling. Those who knew Meghan then claim she already had her sights set on bigger things. That even in Jamaica, even in that moment, Meghan was scanning the horizon, not for a home with Trevor, but for the next opportunity. And when Suits came calling, it wasn't just a career break. It was the breaking point of their marriage. Because Suits didn't just make Meghan a star. It made Trevor obsolete. And what happened next, after the Jamaican wedding glow faded and the Suits spotlight rose, would expose just how ruthless Meghan could be when ambition clashed with commitment. The section is complete. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 5, Career versus Commitment? What if the greatest test of love isn't distance or time, but ambition? What happens when one person in a marriage wants stability, while the other wants the world? That was the defining battle between Meghan Markle and Trevor Engelson after their Jamaican wedding. And it's here, in the tension between career and commitment, that their story begins to fracture beyond repair. Let's dive into it. Every marriage has challenges. For some, it's money. For others, it's family. For Meghan and Trevor, it was geography and ambition, a cocktail that proved toxic. Shortly after they married, Meghan landed her breakout role on Suits. This wasn't just another audition, another small role she could brush off if it didn't work. This was the role, the one that would change her life. But as Suits elevated Meghan's career, it simultaneously dismantled her marriage. Think about the irony. The moment Meghan should have celebrated with her husband, the man who supported her through the grind, became the moment she began to drift from him. Why? Because Suits wasn't filmed in Los Angeles, where Trevor's work was based. It was filmed in Toronto. Suddenly, Meghan was living in Canada, immersed in a new world, while Trevor remained in Hollywood. Now, long-distance relationships can survive if both people are committed. But here's the catch. Meghan's commitment wasn't to Trevor. It was to her career. She threw herself into Suits, into the cast, into the Toronto scene. She was no longer the struggling actress leaning on Trevor. She was Meghan Markle, a series regular, finally basking in recognition. And Trevor? He became a weekend husband, flying in when he could, struggling to hold on to a woman who was no longer standing still. Have you ever seen someone change right in front of you? One day they're yours. The next day they're already slipping away? That's what Trevor endured. Meghan, once dependent on his network, now had her own. She had her own salary, her own platform, her own life. For Trevor, it was disorienting. The woman he thought he'd built a future with was building her own future without him. And here's the cruel contradiction. Meghan's success should have been their shared victory. After all, Trevor was the one who encouraged her, believed in her, supported her through rejection after rejection. But when success came, it didn't unite them. It divided them. Meghan saw Suits as her independence. Trevor saw it as the wedge driving them apart. Let's talk about the emotional toll. Trevor tried. He really did. Friends say he rearranged his schedule, made trips to Toronto, and sent Meghan scripts and opportunities from LA. He wanted her to know he was still in her corner. But Meghan? She was already living as if she didn't need him. Suits gave her something Trevor couldn't: validation. Fame. The beginning of her own identity separate from him. And that's the question that lingers. Was Meghan ever looking for a partner? Or was she always looking for the platform that would free her from needing one? Here's a detail that cuts deep. Meghan reportedly began prioritizing her castmates and her Toronto life over Trevor. She built friendships, networks, a social world that didn't include him. When Trevor visited, he wasn't the center of her life. He was a guest. Imagine that. Flying across the continent to see your wife, only to feel like an outsider in her world. How long could that last before the cracks became unfixable? Have you ever been in a relationship where you felt like you were putting in all the effort, but the other person was already gone? That's where Trevor found himself. He was giving. Meghan was drifting. And then came the coldest signal of all. Meghan began to treat her marriage as an inconvenience. When career opportunities clashed with Trevor's needs, career always won. When choices had to be made, Trevor came second. Always second. That wasn't compromise. That wasn't partnership. That was Meghan choosing herself every single time. Now, let's not pretend Meghan didn't have reasons. Hollywood is brutal. Actresses have a short window to make it. Meghan knew that if she didn't seize Suits with everything she had, it might be her last chance. In her mind, maybe love could wait. Maybe Trevor would understand. But here's the contradiction. Love doesn't wait forever. And Trevor, the man who once seemed indispensable, was becoming disposable. The story takes an even darker twist with the way Meghan communicated her detachment. Instead of honest conversations, instead of working through the struggles, she pulled back silently. Trevor was left guessing, wondering, questioning. While he was trying to hold them together, Meghan was quietly planning her exit. And then it happened. Meghan, the actress who had rehearsed countless scripts, delivered the cruelest performance of all. She ended their marriage not with a tearful goodbye, not even with a face-to-face confrontation, but with an envelope. She mailed back her wedding ring. A FedEx package. Cold. Heartless. Efficient. Pause here. Imagine that moment. You're married. You've fought for the relationship. You believe in forever. And one day, the doorbell rings. A delivery. Inside the package, the ring that once symbolized your love. No words. No closure. Just a silent full stop. How would you feel? Betrayed? Humiliated? Shattered? That's what Trevor faced. And here's where the betrayal deepens. Meghan didn't just walk away. She walked away at the height of her career. Suits was thriving. Her name was rising. She left Trevor behind in the dust, just as she was climbing higher. To Trevor, it wasn't just abandonment. It was erasure. She erased him from her story the moment she no longer needed him. That act, the FedEx divorce, would haunt Trevor for years. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the confirmation that he had never been her forever. He had always been her stepping stone. And yet, even in his devastation, Trevor stayed silent. He could have exposed her. He could have told the world what she had done. He could have painted her as the calculating opportunist she appears to be today. But he didn't. For 12 years, he held it in. Until now. That silence makes his words today even more powerful. Because when a man stays quiet for over a decade, and then finally breaks, you know the truth he's carrying is too heavy to bear. But here's the cliffhanger you didn't see coming. Trevor wasn't the only one who noticed Meghan's detachment. Others in Hollywood were whispering too. Whispers that Meghan's rise wasn't just about talent. That her relationships, romantic and professional, were always strategic. Always transactional. And those whispers? They didn't stop when the marriage ended. They grew louder. Because the marriage may have been over, but Meghan Markle's strategy was only just beginning. And the next move she made would propel her even further, while leaving Trevor behind in the shadows. Every star has a moment. A turning point. That single role. That single opportunity that transforms a struggling unknown into someone the world can't ignore. For Meghan Markle, that moment was Suits. And while the world saw it as the beginning of her rise, Trevor Engelson would come to see it as the beginning of his erasure. So here's the question. Was Suits just Meghan's career breakthrough? Or was it also the catalyst that revealed how little room Trevor had in her new world? Let's set the stage. Before Suits, Meghan had been hustling for years. She was the face you glimpsed in the background of shows like CSI, 90210, or even in game shows like Deal or No Deal, holding a briefcase and smiling for the cameras. She was clawing for relevance in an industry that chews up and spits out hopefuls daily. Hollywood is cruel like that. You can spend years auditioning, grinding, waiting, and all it takes is one role to change everything. For Meghan, Suits wasn't just one role. It was the role. Rachel Zane, sharp, stylish, and ambitious. In other words, a character who mirrored Meghan herself. The irony couldn't be more poetic. Meghan played a paralegal clawing her way into the top tier of a law firm, while off-screen, she was clawing her way into the top tier of Hollywood. Art imitating life. Or was it life imitating art? Now, let's zoom in on the impact. Suits was filmed in Toronto, far from Los Angeles, far from Trevor. Meghan suddenly had independence. A salary, recognition, a cast of co-stars who became like family. New friends, new opportunities. For the first time, she wasn't the actress relying on Trevor's contacts. She was the star of her own show. And Trevor? He was back in LA, producing, waiting, trying to keep the connection alive. Have you ever been in a relationship where one person outgrows the other? Where one takes off, while the other is left trying to catch up? That was Meghan and Trevor after Suits. He was in love. She was in orbit. Here's the contradiction. Success is supposed to be a victory for both partners. When one rises, both rise. But with Meghan, her rise wasn't shared. It was singular. Suits didn't unite her marriage. It divided it. Trevor wanted to be part of her new life. Meghan wanted to build that life without him. Let's talk about those subtle signs. Trevor would visit Meghan in Toronto, expecting intimacy, expecting home. Instead, he was treated like a visitor. Meghan's world no longer revolved around him. It revolved around scripts, rehearsals, long hours on set, cast dinners, industry parties. Trevor, the man who once felt essential, was now optional. And here's where the cruelty cuts deepest. Meghan didn't just drift away. She built a life in Toronto that excluded him. She formed a new identity, a new independence. By the time Trevor arrived, he was stepping into a life already full without him. Now pause. Imagine being Trevor, flying out, hoping to reconnect, only to realize you're no longer the center of your wife's life. That you've been replaced, not by another man, but by ambition itself, which is worse. And then came the moment that has since become infamous. Meghan, in a move that still shocks those who hear it, ended her marriage with a FedEx package. She mailed her wedding ring back to Trevor. No confrontation. No goodbye. No closure. Just a package. Cold. Heartless. Efficient. Ask yourself, what does that say about the marriage? What does that say about Meghan's view of commitment? To Trevor, that package wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was confirmation that he had never been her destination. He had always been her stepping stone. But here's where the irony burns brightest. Suits wasn't just Meghan's professional turning point. It was her personal pivot. The show gave her confidence, financial freedom, and a new network. It gave her the ability to walk away without looking back. And she did. Friends say Trevor was blindsided. He didn't see it coming. Or maybe, deep down, he did, but he refused to believe it until the package arrived. That's the kind of betrayal that scars. The kind that makes you question every moment, every smile, every "I love you" you ever heard. Was any of it real? Or was it all rehearsal? Now, here's where the emotional beat swells. Suits gave Meghan the independence to leave Trevor, but it also set the stage for the next act in her life. Without Suits, there is no Duchess Meghan. Without Suits, she doesn't have the platform to meet the people who would lead her to Prince Harry. The show wasn't just a job. It was the bridge from Trevor to royalty. And Trevor? He was left standing on the wrong side of the river, watching her cross without him. Have you ever helped someone climb, only to realize they've climbed right over you? That's Trevor's story. He supported Meghan through the grind. And when she reached the top of that first peak, she pushed him off the cliff. But here's the twist that no one saw coming. Meghan's marriage to Trevor didn't just end quietly. It ended in whispers that would follow her into the palace. Whispers that Meghan's relationships were never about love. They were about leverage. And those whispers didn't stay in Hollywood. They traveled. They echoed. They resurfaced when Meghan stepped into a far grander stage. Because Suits wasn't just a turning point. It was the rehearsal for the role of her life. And what came after Trevor, what came after Hollywood, what came after that FedEx package, would make the world question whether Meghan Markle has ever truly been offstage at all. How do you end a marriage? Some people sit down across the table, hearts heavy, tears falling, words stumbling out as they try to explain what went wrong. Others hire lawyers, sign papers, and walk away with at least a shred of dignity left. But Meghan Markle? According to Trevor Engelson's story, she ended her marriage with a FedEx package. A small, ordinary delivery containing something extraordinary. Her wedding ring. No goodbye, no confrontation, no final conversation. Just a ring, in a box, in the hands of a courier. And that, my friends, is not just a breakup. That is a statement. Think about it. A wedding ring isn't just jewelry. It's a symbol of every vow spoken, every promise made, every future imagined. To return it by post, as if it were an unwanted purchase from an online store, is to strip the marriage of all meaning. Cold, detached, clinical. And for Trevor, it was devastating. But here's the question we need to ask. What does that kind of ending reveal about the marriage itself? Did Meghan ever see it as real? Or was it always a role, a script, a chapter she was willing to close the moment it no longer served her story? Let's rewind briefly. Their wedding in Jamaica had already raised whispers. Guests said Meghan seemed more focused on the party than the vows. The marriage began with casualness, and it ended with coldness. From start to finish, Trevor may have been more in love with the idea of forever, while Meghan was already planning for what's next. And what was next? Suits had made her a star. Toronto had given her independence. She no longer needed Trevor's network, his industry contacts, his support. She was standing on her own. And so, in the most brutally efficient way possible, she cut the cord. Now, let's imagine Trevor's perspective. You wake up one morning. The phone doesn't ring. There's no explanation. Instead, a package arrives. Inside, the ring that once meant love, now reduced to a return item. Imagine the humiliation. Imagine the shock. Imagine the way his stomach must have dropped, the way his chest must have tightened as he realized. It's over. Not with words, not with closure, but with silence. Have you ever been blindsided like that? Have you ever thought you were building something with someone, only to find out they've already walked away without telling you? That's what Trevor endured. And it wasn't just heartbreak. It was erasure. Meghan didn't just leave him. She deleted him. And here's where the contradictions sharpen. Meghan built her brand later on the image of compassion, empathy, kindness. She stood on stages, gave speeches, spoke about humanity and healing. Yet in her most intimate relationship, when it mattered most, she ended things with the emotional equivalent of a business transaction. No kindness, no compassion, just logistics. Doesn't that make you wonder? If she could treat her first husband that way, how much of her later compassion was genuine and how much was performance? Now, let's go deeper. The divorce wasn't messy in public. There were no explosive court battles, no screaming matches in tabloids. Meghan's method, the FedEx package, ensured that. It was quick, clean, efficient. The kind of exit you'd expect from someone who values image above intimacy. She wanted out, and she wanted it without drama. But the lack of drama didn't make it painless. For Trevor, it was worse. Because silence leaves wounds that words can't heal. Friends close to Trevor say he was shattered. He had given everything to the marriage, his love, his belief, his support. And in return, he got an envelope. Some said he never saw it coming. Others whispered that maybe, deep down, he always knew Meghan's ambition would outrun him. Either way, he was left standing in the wreckage, wondering if he had ever truly known the woman he married. And here's the darker layer. Meghan's career thrived after the divorce. She didn't stumble. She didn't pause. She moved forward with velocity. New opportunities, new connections, new visibility. The divorce wasn't a setback. It was a stepping stone. The very thing Trevor now says he became in her life. Do you see the irony? The man who once believed he was her forever ended up being nothing more than a launch pad. The ring she mailed back wasn't just a rejection of him. It was her way of saying, I don't need you anymore. But the whispers didn't stop there. In Hollywood, people talk. And when Meghan walked away from Trevor with such cold efficiency, those whispers turned into warnings. Was Meghan the type to use people until they had nothing left to give? Was Trevor just the first casualty of a much bigger strategy? And here's the part that makes this chapter unforgettable. Meghan didn't just end a marriage. She revealed a pattern that would follow her all the way to the palace. Relationships as strategy, love as leverage, commitment as convenience. And when the usefulness ends, so does the relationship. Now pause and ask yourself, if Meghan could treat Trevor this way, the man who believed in her before the fame, how would she treat others once she had the fame? Once she had the spotlight? Once she had the crown? Because the FedEx package wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of a new narrative. The story of a woman who always seemed to be looking past the man in front of her, toward the opportunity waiting just beyond him. But Trevor's silence after the divorce speaks volumes too. He didn't run to tabloids. He didn't sell his story. He didn't expose her immediately. He stayed quiet. Which makes you wonder, was it dignity? Or was it fear? Fear of her power. Fear of what she could do to him if he crossed her. Or maybe just fear that speaking out would make him look bitter, small, irrelevant. Either way, that silence lasted 12 long years. Until now. And the words he's chosen, calling himself a stepping stone, cut sharper than any scandal. Because Meghan's divorce from Trevor wasn't the end of a love story. It was the start of the legend she would build. And what came after? The roles, the fame, the prince, the palace. All of it rests on the foundation of that FedEx box. But here's the twist. For 12 years, Trevor stayed in the shadows, licking his wounds, rebuilding his life. And Meghan? She kept climbing faster and higher until she was standing on the global stage. Yet the higher she climbed, the more dangerous Trevor's silence became. Because silence doesn't last forever. And when it breaks, as it just has, the echoes can destroy everything. Silence. Sometimes it's louder than words. For 12 years, Trevor Engelson kept his mouth shut. No interviews. No tell-alls. No dramatic leaks to the press. While Meghan Markle rose from TV actress to duchess, from Hollywood hopeful to royal renegade, Trevor stayed in the background. Watching. Waiting. Enduring. But here's the twist. Silence is never empty. Silence holds weight. It holds memory. It holds power. And Trevor's silence, 12 years of it, spoke volumes long before he ever broke it. So here's the question. Why did he stay quiet? Was it dignity? Was it heartbreak? Or was it fear of what would happen if he spoke? Let's rewind. After the FedEx package, the cold delivery that ended their marriage, Trevor could have gone nuclear. Hollywood thrives on scandal. Tabloids would have paid him millions to spill the truth. Imagine the headlines. Producer exposes Meghan Markle's secret life. It would have sold papers, dominated talk shows, and maybe even derailed Meghan's career before it reached its peak. But Trevor didn't. He chose silence. And that choice shaped everything. At first, people assumed it was heartbreak. That Trevor was too devastated to speak. Friends said he was blindsided, crushed, embarrassed. How do you put into words the humiliation of being discarded like that? Maybe he couldn't. Maybe silence was survival. Others whispered it was fear. Meghan was rising, and fast. With Suits taking off, with her networking prowess growing, she was becoming someone powerful. To go up against her could have made Trevor look bitter, jealous, pathetic. Hollywood is cruel like that. It eats up scorned exes and spits them out. Maybe he thought the smartest move was no move at all. But here's another possibility. Maybe Trevor believed silence was the only way to maintain his dignity. By saying nothing, he denied Meghan the chance to frame him as the bitter ex-husband. By staying quiet, he kept control, even if that control was invisible. Have you ever been so hurt that the only option was to say nothing? To let silence carry the weight of your feelings? That's what Trevor did. He turned silence into his shield. And yet, silence is not peace. For 12 years, he carried the memory of how it ended. The FedEx package, the humiliation, the whispers that he had been nothing more than a stepping stone. Silence doesn't erase those things. It buries them. And what's buried eventually demands to be unearthed. Meanwhile, Meghan's story soared. She wasn't just Meghan the actress anymore. She was Meghan the Duchess. Her face was everywhere. She was giving interviews, delivering speeches, walking red carpets with royalty. For Trevor, every headline must have been a reminder. Every photo, every story, another wound reopened. The woman who mailed back his ring was now a global icon. Imagine carrying that contradiction. And here's where it gets darker. Meghan's royal chapter amplified Trevor's silence. People began to wonder, who was the man she left behind? Why was he so quiet? And in that wondering, Trevor gained something powerful, mystique. His silence became its own kind of story, a question mark hanging over Meghan's past. Hollywood insiders whispered about a possible TV project. Rumors spread that Trevor considered developing a show loosely inspired by his experience, a comedy about a man whose ex-wife marries into royalty. But even that he never pushed forward. It was like he wanted to hint at his truth without fully speaking it. Silence again. Strategic, deliberate. But here's the irony. While Meghan spoke endlessly, interviews, speeches, memoirs, Trevor's silence may have hurt her more. Because silence can't be refuted. Silence can't be spun. Silence lets people imagine the worst. Have you noticed that? When someone stays silent, we fill in the blanks. And often, what we imagine is worse than the truth. Trevor didn't need to attack Meghan. All he had to do was stay quiet, and the mystery did the rest. Still, silence has a cost. For Trevor, it meant carrying his pain privately. For 12 years, he lived with the knowledge that the woman he loved used him, discarded him, and never looked back. That kind of wound doesn't heal easily. It festers. It grows heavier with time. And here's the contradiction again. Meghan was building a public image as a humanitarian, a victim of unfair treatment, a voice for compassion. Meanwhile, Trevor's silence was a living contradiction to that image. If she was so compassionate, why had she ended her first marriage with such cruelty? If she was such a victim, why was her ex-husband silent about his own pain? The cracks were always there. Trevor's silence was the proof. But silence doesn't last forever. Eventually, the weight breaks you. Eventually, the truth demands to be spoken. And after 12 years, Trevor finally broke. His words were simple but cutting. Meghan didn't marry him for love. She married him because he was useful. He was a stepping stone. And once she didn't need him, she left. And just like that, the silence turned into an earthquake. Because those words don't just reshape our view of Meghan's past. They reshape our view of everything that came after. If Trevor was just a stepping stone, who else was? Was Suits just a stepping stone? Was Hollywood? Was Prince Harry? Was the royal family itself just the grandest stepping stone of all? Trevor's silence protected Meghan for years. His voice, now, threatens to destroy her carefully built image. But here's the chilling thought. If Trevor stayed silent this long, what else is he still holding back? What secrets still remain buried? And what happens if he decides to reveal them too? Because breaking the silence is never just about one revelation. It's about opening the door. And once that door is open, more truth always comes spilling out. Imagine being Trevor Engelson. You've just been discarded like yesterday's news. The woman who once promised you forever mailed her wedding ring back in a FedEx package and moved on without a backward glance. You're left behind, rebuilding your life in Hollywood, licking wounds in silence. And then, years later, you turn on the TV. There she is. Not just Meghan Markle, the actress from Suits. Not just Meghan Markle, the woman who walked out on you. No, she's Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex. She's walking down the aisle in Windsor, her every move broadcast to millions around the world. She's marrying Prince Harry, a real-life royal. Can you imagine that moment? Seeing your ex-wife marry into one of the most powerful families in the world? Knowing the woman who used you as a stepping stone is now ascending to the biggest platform on earth? That's where Trevor's story takes a surreal, almost cinematic twist. Because Meghan didn't just leave him. She outgrew him in the most public way possible. And here's the contradiction. To the world, Meghan's marriage to Harry looked like a fairy tale. The struggling actress from LA, overlooked and underestimated, had become a duchess. Love conquers all. A modern romance. But for Trevor, it wasn't romance. It was recognition. He recognized the pattern. He'd seen this script before. Let's talk about patterns for a moment. Meghan met Trevor when she was an unknown. He gave her access, support, opportunity. Once she had her footing, she walked away. Years later, she met Harry. A prince, a global platform, a golden ticket into history. Once again, Meghan's ambition found its next stepping stone. The palace wasn't just love. It was leverage. Ask yourself, do you believe in coincidence? Or do you believe in design? For Trevor, the palace wedding must have felt like déjà vu. The same charm, the same performance, the same dazzling ability to win hearts and control narratives. Only this time, it wasn't happening at a Hollywood party or a Jamaican beach wedding. It was happening on a global stage, with the Queen's blessing, with cameras capturing every angle. And here's the cruel irony. Trevor stayed silent during Meghan's rise on Suits. He endured the whispers in Hollywood. He watched her build a brand out of compassion and resilience, while he carried the memory of her cold exit. But the royal wedding must have been unbearable, not just because Meghan had moved on, but because the world believed in the fairy tale. Millions were cheering for the woman who had treated him like disposable fuel. Have you ever seen someone you know intimately being celebrated publicly and felt the weight of the truth no one else sees? That's Trevor's burden. While the world cheered Meghan, he remembered the FedEx package. While the world swooned at her vows to Harry, he remembered how she treated her vows to him. While the world called her a fairy tale bride, he called her a strategist. And that's where the contradiction explodes. Meghan framed her royal marriage as a triumph of love, a break from tradition, a modern story for a modern monarchy. But Trevor's truth undermines it. Because if Meghan used Trevor as a stepping stone, what's to say she didn't use Harry the same way? Let's pause here. If you're Harry, how would you feel knowing your wife once ended a marriage with a FedEx package? That she once treated love like logistics? That she once discarded a man who believed in her the moment she no longer needed?